Is happiness a choice?
That is a very big question. And I think people will disagree on this. I think it's going to be
controversial.
Yes, it's going to be controversial. But I think for most people, I think it genuinely is. But I do think there's got to be that caveat. I think obviously mental health issues are real, and there are some genuine chemical imbalances and stuff that can happen that can obviously make people very unhappy. But I think actually, fortunately for the majority of us, I'm going to say it is, in my opinion, Dan.
Yeah, I think most people will disagree with you though.
Do you?
Because putting the emphasis on it's your responsibility to make yourself happy, that then puts the blame, inverted commas, on the person who's not happy. So then it's not. So
are you saying people won't agree with me because it's a tough pill to swallow if you're saying
I think
it's
so.
my choice?
Yeah, and I guess the reason we're talking about this is because, and I think you've listened to this podcast episode or watched the video. I recently watched a video, which was an interview, that was the best piece of content I've ever consumed in my life.
Oh,
and I don't say that lightly.
Oh, bloody hell. Is that why you keep sending it to me in different places?
I put it in our family WhatsApp group, our work Slack. It's just, so basically what it is an interview on the Diary of a CEO, Steve Bartlett's podcast, where he interviews happiness expert Mo Gawdat. I think that's how you spell his name. And there's so much, like I was listening to it and rewinding it, and it made me feel emotional. It made me feel like this information is incredible. I instantly posted everywhere about it, and I instantly obviously sent the video to everyone I know because it was so... And hopefully in this episode, we're going to unpack what we've learned, because you've listened to it as well.
Yeah, I have.
It.
But I thought it was brilliant, actually, and full of really great information and perspectives, and kind of great information on how I think a lot of us can make ourselves happier. But I do think it's definitely had a massive impact on you, like I said, because you keep basically since you listened to it, you keep talking about it, and you've been sending it everywhere. So why do you think that particular podcast had such an impact on you?
That's a good question. I think it's because it completely made me change my opinion on a topic in a really positive way.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Because before I didn't necessarily think happiness was a choice. I think if someone would have said that, I'd be sort of saying, that's out of order. What, you're blaming all the people who aren't happy on them. That's not fair.
Yeah,
terrible things happen to people, and you're saying it's their fault that they're not happy.
And that sounds very harsh, doesn't it?
But when you listen to Mo's story and I'll talk you through some of that if anyone's interested, and what's happened in his life and what he's now doing, it just goes to show that no matter how terrible the things are that happen to you, you can still be happy.
Okay. Well, I want to hear about Mo's story then, because this is, it's had a big impact on you, and you love it, and I think it's really cool. And now we need to share it with the anchors.
So first of all, I think, sometimes you listen to podcasts and the people speaking just have really interesting voices and ways of speaking. I know this sounds mental, but he's just, when he speaks...
I like a podcast because he speaks in a good way.
No, not like that.
Okay.
He's really interesting. So first of all, he's really interesting to listen to. But his backstory is he was the chief business officer at Google X. Do you know what Google X is?
Something to do with Google, I reckon.
Yeah, well done. It's basically their kind of specialist department where they do the crazy projects like self-driving cars and supplying the world with Wi-Fi with helium balloons and stuff. All these kind of crazy projects. And he was heading that up. Incredibly successful guy, multi-millionaire, and had everything you'd possibly want in life. Incredibly intelligent, had a lovely family, but he was incredibly unhappy.
Oh, okay. Yep. Curveball.
Yeah. And he basically, he got to one point where he just didn't understand how his mind or whatever was making him unhappy when he had everything you could possibly, like everything everyone dreamed of, he had all the fast cars, he had a lovely family, lovely homes, everything you could, you'd think traditionally you'd want, and he was unhappy. And he was, he is like in the podcast, he explains he's very technically minded. He was a coder. So he started coding from a young age, and he basically he had enough at one point, and he wanted to figure out why is he unhappy and how can he be happier. So he kind of treated himself as a project with his kind of technical approach to stuff, and sort of said, right, I'm going to try and figure out why am I unhappy and how can I be happier. So he went on this journey of reading loads of research, loads of studies. He even did his own studies as part of Google interviewed thousands of people and did surveys and stuff to try and figure out why was he unhappy. And from all that research, he eventually came up with the happiness equation.
Right.
So do you want to know what the happiness?
I would love to know what the happiness equation is, please, Dan Knowlton.
And this is a really, really important thing. So the happiness equation is, it says this: your happiness is equal to or greater than the difference between the events of your life and your expectations of how life should be. So
right. So you're talking about the difference between your
expectation versus reality.
What's actually...
So for example, you're living your life, Lloyd, and your expectations by this age, you should have a wife and 5 children and a mansion and a Ferrari, and you should have planted 1 billion trees, and you're very far away from achieving that, so you're unhappy because there's a big gap.
Yeah. Well, I haven't achieved all that.
Whereas if your expectations were you've got a lovely wife and a lovely son and you're doing okay, much lower expectations, you're already achieving that. So
is that not rubbish though? That because surely then everyone could just be like, my expectations are I don't have to eat manure for breakfast every day. And then every day you go, oh, I'm not going to eat shit. And you go, yes, I'm so happy.
No, surely that's just a ridiculous...
but lower your expectations. Like, oh, my expectations are nothing good's going to happen.
Well, he talks about this, and he talks about gratitude being one of the key kind of tools you can use to help bridge that gap. So you're there thinking, oh, I wish I had a mansion and a Ferrari, but maybe you're thinking, actually, do you know what? Comparatively to the world, I've got food, I've got shelter, I've got support, I'm doing all right. And then that gap starts to close, and by showing gratitude, you can start
So it's not necessarily about lowering your expectations because that's what makes you happy. It's like saying it's about making that gap smaller and being grateful for where you are to make that gap smaller.
And I definitely don't think you should suddenly lower your like, for example, we've got big expectations and big goals we want to achieve with this business and in life, and I'm not going to lower that to then try and be happier. I think I get everyone's different, but I get motivated and feel happiness from feeling like I'm working towards a goal.
Yeah,
it's the classic kind of, it's the journey, not the result that motivates you. But there's a next part to this story, and it starts to get even more interesting.
Okay.
So he, on this journey of discovering the happiness equation, his son, Ali, went on this journey with him and was a super clever guy. And they worked together, looking at all the studies and things, and studied together. And then I think in the podcast he mentions he was 19 and his son Ali went in for a routine operation, really basic operation. And the doctors and nurses made 5 mistakes and he died. Basically, a routine operation. So obviously his whole life, sort of...
That's the worst thing most people can think of. Yeah. Having your child pass away, basically. Yeah.
So obviously, after doing all this research into happiness and going on that journey and then eventually being happy, and then this happened, it really put his whole theory to the test. And what I found really interesting was he talks about, so when that happened, he talks about the happiness flow chart, which is like 3 levels of happiness. So this is practical stuff you can actually do to go from not happy to happy, even if terrible things have happened to you. And this is how he did it.
Okay.
So he says, level 1 of happiness. So I'll give you an example. If for example, your wife said something nasty to you, and in your mind you thought...
She did.
Okay, Okay,
Yeah.
fine. And
Yeah.
in your mind, you thought she doesn't love me anymore, and that makes you unhappy,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Level 1 happiness is asking yourself, is that thought in your mind that's making you unhappy true or not? And in reality, if your wife said something nasty to you, I doubt it's because she doesn't love you anymore. She may have been tired, or there may be other reasons. So level 1 is, if it's not true, take that thought out of your head completely and forget it.
Because we do tend to, I think, build things up in our own minds of like, oh, my boss said this to me. That might mean that they don't like me. Or, oh, my wife says, Lloyd, I really hate it that you look like that.
Yeah.
And we might think that she doesn't love us.
Exactly. And then we overthink it, right? But usually, a lot of the time, it's not true, and you can take that thought out. Yeah. That's level 1.
Okay.
But let's say it is true. Okay, this is where you go to level 2.
She doesn't love me.
Let's say your wife doesn't love you anymore. Okay.
Oh, I'm not sure I like this example.
No, let's just go. Just roll with it.
Okay.
Let's say your wife doesn't love you anymore. Okay.
We can not say it loads of times.
The second question is, can you do something about it? So your wife doesn't love you anymore. Can you do something about it? Yes, you can, because you can have a chat with her and say,
she used to love me, so I could say, oh,
what did I used to do?
I'll be that guy. I'll lose 2 stone. I'll be that guy again.
Exactly. So that's the second question. Can you do something about it? Now, in Mo's case, the answer to that was no. So his son has obviously passed away. Was it true? Yes, it was true. So he had to go to level 2.
Yeah.
Could he do something about it? He couldn't. There's nothing you can do to bring anyone back, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So then you go to level 3, and he calls this like the Jedi level of happiness. If terrible things have happened to you and you have to go past those 2 stages, what's level 3? So he calls level 3 committed acceptance.
Okay.
And this is where you ask yourself, can I accept what's happened and start to do something to make my life better despite its presence?
So you're completely accepting that that's a thing. So something horrible's happened. I can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
And now I'm going to accept that horrible thing's happened and try and take action to...
So in his case, he's now on a mission to make 1 billion people happy. He's written a book, can't remember what it's called, but he creates loads of content.
Good research.
I did actually, it's been too long. And he's on a mission now to go out to the world, and he feels some level of sort of satisfaction in the sense that although this terrible thing has happened to him, he's now going to use that and go out to the world and make the world a better place. And that's really, and I think that would be very difficult to do. I don't think that's easy at all, which is why I guess it's level 3. But again, these kind of things feel like they're easier said than done when you haven't experienced that.
Yeah.
Like we're talking about, is happiness a choice? But we're not going through terrible things. We've got food and shelter and
but
support.
I think those 3 steps that you talked about, even just knowing that, and I know that this guy, what's his name?
Mo Gawdat.
Mo
Gawdat?
Yeah, Mo. Let's say Mo. Yeah, I know there's obviously a lot more to what he talks about, but then these 3 steps are the kind of the basis of a lot of it. But I think even with those things, that first step of is it true? I think a lot of the times when you actually ask yourself that, it's not, because you something's true. So like Sarah didn't like that I
left
didn't
your clothes on the floor.
Yeah, I left the clothes on the floor, and then I start thinking like, oh, she's gonna leave me, and actually, is
she gonna leave you?
She's probably not. It depends how long I do stuff like that for. But I think we do build stuff up in our head, and then that becomes the thing, and that's not actually true.
Yeah,
it's because sometimes you worry about all the things that could happen, or could be true, but it's none of that stuff's true.
And I also think I think we're very lucky because, and I don't know, I'm speaking for you, but I feel like we're quite happy. But I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of someone who's unhappy and think, what would I do if I really wasn't feeling happy? And I'd be trying to proactively do something to better it, if that makes sense.
To better it.
Not
what
to
do you
better
mean?
it, but to get out of that. Like for example, sometimes I do feel unhappy.
Yeah.
You don't feel great. The thing I do, exercise, makes me feel like playing squash with you.
Yeah.
sometimes I felt tired and really not in a good mood and just everything's pissing me off basically. We go play squash for like 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Feel amazing.
Yeah.
And it's obviously the chemicals and stuff that are being released.
I think also knowing that, speaking outside of the world of mental illness and of kind of how the brain is supposed to work, I think people say like, oh, you're a happy person or you're an unhappy person. Those feelings are things that come and go and change over time. Like a lot of people say like, oh, I am unhappy or I am happy. In reality, each day I probably feel happy and unhappy
loads of times,
like 50 times each. And it's like they are normal emotions to feel. Like something negative happens and you start to feel unhappy. And then if you have techniques like this, or if you're fortunate enough to have lots of positive things happening at the same time, you can go up and down. So I think sometimes there's kind of the label on it, like you have to be this thing, when in reality, the mixture of emotions changes all the time.
And in the podcast, he actually talks about unhappiness and he says, we need unhappiness. Unhappiness is natural. And he talks about unhappiness is your body telling you that something isn't quite right, or your brain telling you something isn't quite right and you need to change something. Because, like if you didn't have that feeling, there'd be things going on and that,
You'd just be out there murdering people and going, oh, this is so much fun.
I mean, that's a mental example, but yeah, it's one of those natural things that you're, like when in the caveman days, when you the fight or flight thing, when you're getting attacked by a lion, if you just felt happy that a lion was like gouging your eyes out, oh, this is brilliant.
That's not going to help you, is it?
No, it's whereas that unhappy feeling kind of triggers you to.
So, are you happy, Dan?
I say so.
Good.
Yeah. Are you?
I say so.
Are you?
Yes, I am. Yeah, I think I've definitely recently let things make me feel unhappy more often than I would have liked, and
like
felt mainly things to do with work and the business, feeling stressed about things and unhappy about things that I didn't want to be like they were.
Right.
But I think listening to that podcast and what you've been talking about has actually really helped with that as well, and putting perspective on things and knowing, asking those who, is it true? Or, like there's constantly, I think when you run a business, there's constantly worries of like, what if this happens? What if this happens? What if this happens? And that whole thing of, oh, is it true? It's like, no, it's not true. You think about loads of things an infinite amount of things that could be a truth at any point in the future, but probably won't.
That's where the choice comes in, though, because you can't choose what happens to you in life. Like everything that happens to you, good and bad things happen. You can't be in control of that, but you can choose the way you react to them. And I think listening to this is why I keep banging on about this interview, because it made me think, and I sort of envisioned terrible things happening in my life, and then I thought, now I have a kind of proactive approach I'd follow when that happens, which is.
Do you know what as well? I remember being in my early 20s and I remember thinking, if I find someone that I love and they love me and we have a child, I will have everything I could possibly want and I'll be the happiest person alive. And the reality is I've got that because I'm really fortunate. But then your brain just goes on to, it's like, yeah, got that. Okay, now I want this. I want this stuff. I want more than that. I think when you look at it and go, actually, there's not, if you think about it, there's not much you genuinely need to feel happy if you think about it. Like if I have Leo and Sarah, you could lose your money and your house and stuff. Like in the end, you'll be, yeah.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
So what do you, outside of this interview we both listened to, do you have any tips for happiness, or like anything that if someone's not feeling happy, that other than obviously listening to that interview, because seriously, definitely after listening to this, go and
well, I think listen to that interview. Obviously, if you're really feeling unhappy and you feel there's nothing you can do about it, then speak to a medical professional or doctor and speak to friends and stuff. But the whole gratitude thing, I know we've spoken about that before, putting perspective on things is a big thing for me. And like you saying, that whole thing of your expectation, it's weird. Like, so say, I want to have £5 million in the bank, and then so I definitely don't. So you feel like, oh, I'm sad.
Yeah.
And then say you've got some thing of like, oh, I'm going to build this business and I'm going to have 5 million in the bank, and then something changes and you go, oh, I'm only going to have 2 million in the bank, and at that point you feel sad. But then as soon as you realize, as soon as you go like, actually, as soon as you forget the 5 million, go, wow, having like £2 million in the bank, that is absolutely amazing. And then you realign those expectations. So I think I'm better now at realigning my expectations. So if something disappoints you or something doesn't go quite right, quite quickly going, okay, let's have a new goal or new expectations, rather than dwelling on that. Like, oh, I didn't get my dream job at Google.
But I got a wicked job at Facebook.
Yeah, then you're like, I'm going to apply for these 8 jobs that are for these really interesting companies. That'd be really cool. And that's my new expectation. Let's try and do this. So quickly realigning the expectations, I think, has been big for me in the last few years.
There's a real life example of that. Someone we know, who I won't mention, found out that they were going to be getting a chunk of money back because there was an error in their investments. And their friend, the same error happened to their friend, and their friend got back like 160,000, and they thought pounds, like a huge amount of money,
not pence.
And this person thought, right, looking at their investment level, I'm probably going to get around £100,000 back because there was an error, and then they actually found out they only got like 40,000 back, and they were sad. Yeah. When really, if you look at it, you've just got £40,000 for nothing.
And if you didn't know about that other thing that made you think you're going to get 100,000, you've basically won the lottery. You've got £40,000. Yeah, it's weird having the expectation that's higher first makes that an unhappy thing rather than a happy thing. That is crazy.
Just goes to show it's that expectation versus reality.
Yeah. Interesting. Have you got anything else you want to talk about for this episode, Dan?
No, I just, other than please go and watch that interview. It's on YouTube and on Apple and Spotify and everything. Steve Bartlett's The Diary of a CEO, Mo Gawdat interview, and it will change your life.
Nice. We hope you're feeling happy. We hope you're not feeling too blue this week. And we look forward to seeing you in the next episode of the Business Anchors podcast.
See you then.